Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a great evening for us today to have Dr. Gautham with us. This event is one of the first type of events we are trying to make a path or maybe a journey from 2022, where we want leaders across the globe come and share their experience and help us with some learning key takeaways, how exactly things had been throughout for them. And to begin with such a interesting category, I am very much honored to have Gautham with us today. So just a quick bio about Gautham. Gautham is an award-winning author of Leading with Empathy. He is a digital transformation expert, an executive advisor at VMware, and a topic which is much more complex for me to understand at this stage, but he's an empathetic leader. I'd love to talk more and more about him, but we have the next 1 hour only for him to walk us through all this memory lanes, how exactly his journey from an organic way of transforming himself as a leader to a certain extent has become revolutionary a lot of times, and his views on a lot of interesting subjects. So to get started, first, I would like to welcome Gautham. Gautham, thanks for coming to us and talk in this DevOps Institute India chapter. We are excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me. It's excited to be here. Very excited.
Great. So just to talk about the basic core, introductions. Gautham, your journey. So we have talked a lot. We have talked a lot about how exactly you have paved your, roadblocks, or maybe you have moved ahead in your career. So just to know more about your professional journey till date, if you can give us a quick walkthrough on the memory lane.
Sure. It's always interesting to walk down memory lane, right? And I would encourage all of you to make this a dialogue. I don't want it to be a one-way conversation, and I don't want it to be just Shantanu and Aparna talking. So feel free to jump in whenever needed. We're all friends here, and it's late evening, so I really appreciate you all taking your Saturday evenings to have a conversation. So my journey arc. So I'm basically born in Bangalore and grew up all over the place. My elementary education was in England, and then came back to Bangalore. Did the rest of my schooling there. A lot of education in North India, and then came to the US to do my PhD, and that's the academic side of things. I was actually in academia, so I taught in India for about 3 years or 4 years. I was an assistant professor and I was a lecturer in computer science in Bangalore and in Goa, of all places. And I'm also the founder of a number of Linux users groups in India. So when it was a big thing, and I really enjoyed promoting Linux and driving Linux through those Linux users groups. So I joined here for my PhD in Texas Arlington, focused on computer science, mostly smart homes and smart technologies for assisted healthcare. We were working on technology to improve the quality of life of patients suffering from Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And I really enjoyed that. I did a couple of internship stints over there. Got a taste of the difference in pace between academia and industry, and decided that industry is the way for me. And so I decided to switch. I joined a telecommunications company, actually Cisco. And I was working there. I was a software developer. And then I moved to another organization, which is really big here. It handles most of the 911 calls, which is basically your emergency services, notifications, platforms, calls, 1-800 numbers, most of these voice applications, all those various things, and then conferencing and collaboration platforms. So I moved over there. I started working as a developer, and then I moved into a lead role. And that was interesting because at that time we didn't really have a lot of engineering people in management. We either had people managers or we had technologists. And so there was the concept that you can have a technical person be a manager, be a people person, was a little alien at that time. And so I decided to get a seat at the table, try through that, represent my technical brethren, so to speak. And then since then, I started enjoying leadership and management, and I started growing up. And yeah, right now I'm at VMware. I'm a senior executive advisor. I partner with a lot of Fortune 1000 companies and help them on their digital transformations. Yeah, I get to talk to people like you.
So, Gautam, when we talk about a lot of inspirations and learnings that we have in our life, it's through the daily events that we come across, or maybe it's something that is inculcated on us since our childhood, the way we see things. So I've seen a lot of good leaders who are very calm and composed. I've seen a lot of good leaders who are very much aggressive in the way they do their activities, be it personally, be it professionally. But that resonates how they move ahead. Now, in terms of the key factors, how you shape up exactly as a leader. So there are certain things that differentiates from some people who are born that way versus some people who are groomed and conditioned to be that way. What do you
Yeah.
see, are the key factors which is valued as a skill set across the leadership space?
That's a pretty broad question. So I think let me try to break it down into a couple of things. I think in order to be a really good leader, there needs to be connectivity. There needs to be a relationship between people and between with the company. So the first focus is on what is your passion. As a leader, you want to really understand what drives you, what makes you tick. Why do you want to be a leader? More often than not, especially when I'm mentoring some of the people's, what I've found is some people feel that the only way that they can progress in life is by getting promotions and then earning a title. John Maxwell has a really good book. It's called The 5 Levels of Leadership, which talks about the different ways in which you progress and become a leader. And the first thing is the level 1 is actually to get the title, right? So you have the permission to actually become a leader. But there is a lot of difference between being a person with a title and managing people versus actually being a leader. A leader is someone inspirational, is someone who can connect to people at a very emotional level and at an empathic level, and who can influence the others around them. And they want to lead because they have a common purpose, they have a common passion, they have a common goal. And that's something that I feel differentiates leaders between ordinary managers. Passion is something that's really important. The other thing that I feel is a lot of these leaders, be they aggressive leaders or be they much more subtle leaders, their superpower is that they have belief in their purpose and belief in what they want to accomplish. They don't limit themselves. So, for example, when we're growing up, we have all these various sayings, right? We say, no pain, no gain, or good things will come to those who wait, or life is hard. When they feel true because we reiterate them in our life and other people say it or family members say it, it becomes kind of our family values. But sometimes it becomes excuses for our actions or inactions. And these are called limiting beliefs. And they usually start with things like, I'm not, or I can't, or I don't. And one of my mentors calls them mind viruses because they can actually be passed from one person to another. So if there is a nascent leader and the leader says, oh, I can't handle the pressure if I'm promoted, that's a limiting belief. And a lot of these good leaders don't have that limit. So if you truly want to be a leader and you want to embrace and achieve all these various things, first be honest. And I would actually recommend to perform a SWOT analysis on yourself. So SWOT analysis, as you know, comes from product management, and it stands for the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when you consider yourself as a product and you start looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, then you understand that all the weaknesses that you're identifying are your limiting beliefs. And then you take those limiting beliefs and convert that into a motivator. So Let's say that I have a weakness listed saying that I'm not ready to manage a team of 10 people. I can then take that limiting belief and convert it into a motivator by just adding a really simple word. I say to myself, I'm not ready to manage a team of 10 people yet. See how powerful that word is? I mean, just saying the word yet, it changes the weakness into a motivator, and now it allows me to develop opportunities to work on that and make it a strength. And this realization will make it extremely liberating. And what I've found funny is that we do this with technology. If we don't know a technology, we always say, okay, I don't know this technology yet, but I'm going to watch videos, I'm going to use tutorials, and I'm going to perform hands-on experiments to learn this particular technology. What we're actually doing in our minds is we're taking this limiting belief of I don't know this technology and then putting a yet at the end of it, and then developing countermeasures and strategies to overcome the deficiency that we have. And that I think is really, really powerful to embrace, especially when you want to be a good leader. And yet is really a very powerful word. That's what I feel.
Great. Aparna, you had a question. You want to go ahead with that?
Yeah, sure. Gautam, I really like that SWOT analysis. I think I'll work on it too on a couple of things that I really need to keep up with. Um, this journey of yours, especially the book which you've written and all, can you define empathy? I think that's the most used and the misused word these days because they say, aren't you empathetic? Or we need empathetic leaders. But what exactly are we looking at? Not just our. And the second part of the question is, can this be groomed to a person? Is it a childhood quality?
That's a great question. So I agree with you. The word empathy has become an umbrella word, and it's become kind of a catch-all phrase for a number of things. So let me try to break down what empathy means. And then if you're really interested, there's much more detail in the book, but I'm going to contain myself to a couple of things here. So empathy is basically a feeling that you have with another human being. You have an emotional connection and you try to understand things from their point of view. And if you, when you have that visceral feeling that you want to do something to improve their life, that's truly what empathy is. Um, the reason why it feels that empathy is so broad is there are actually three different kinds of empathy in that exist. The first one is cognitive empathy. So cognitive empathy is where it's a very rational response, and you are putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or you're doing the point of view of the other person. There's no emotional connection out there. So people like negotiators or sales executives, they use cognitive empathy a lot because they want to put themselves in the customer's shoes, or in the case of a negotiator, it's the victim shoes or the perpetrator's shoes, and try to get that rational connection between them. But there is no emotion involved in cognitive empathy. So that's one type of empathy. Usually when people use the word empathy, they are saying they are defining what is called emotional empathy. So this is at an emotional level. You have a connection between two people. You feel the pain of the other person, and you commiserate with them. You're allowing the other person to experience that pain completely, or that emotion completely. And that's emotional empathy. And it can be very taxing because you always have to be on and you have to connect with the person. And anyone who's been in a relationship knows how taxing it is to constantly be aware and be sensitive of the other person's feelings and needs. So that's emotional empathy. High performing teams, especially in high performing teams, scrum masters, for example, or team leads, they are extremely emotionally empathic because they have that connectivity between each other and they can feel off of each other. So high performing teams are a really good example of emotional empathy. And then there is one more step beyond, which is compassionate empathy or affective empathy. So this is where you not only have that emotional connection, a genuine emotional connection, but what you are doing is you are trying to work with the other person to find ways to reduce that pain. So that's the action portion of it. You're taking active steps to reduce the pain. Um, so when you're an empathic leader, and especially when you're on a compassionate empathy leadership scale, you are trying to remove the impediments or trying to remove the pain that the person is feeling. And that is very powerful. So for example, mentoring or coaching is a really good example of compassionate empathy, because you're not only having an emotional connection, you're trying to work with the person to reduce the pain that they're facing. So as you can see, you have three different kinds of empathy. And it's not very clear to people when they use the word empathy, whether they want emotional empathy, whether they want compassionate empathy, or whether they're just thinking of cognitive empathy. So that's one of the bigger challenges that are coming. For me personally, and this is my guiding principle for empathy, if I can put myself in someone else's shoes, if I can understand the pain that they're going through, I can feel it. And this is the most important part for me. If I put their happiness over mine and I do something about their pain, that's when I feel that I'm really empathic. And so as you can see, I lean more towards the compassionate empathy side of things rather than emotional or cognitive. Now, to your second part of the question, Aparna, it was about whether it is a trait or whether it is a skill that can be learned. And I would say that empathy is something that you grow, you develop, you grow. So, for example, take small children, right? I mean, I have a small boy. I have a 7-year-old boy, and I've seen him grow up, and we've done a lot of experiments. By the way, I've included a number of the experiments that I've run with him in my book. So if you're interested in that, you can take a look at it. We've done lean, agile, and DevOps experiments together in his personal life and to have emotional development. So if you're interested, check it out. But so when they're small children, the focus is always on themselves. So they're being self-aware and they are focusing on things that are themselves. And I wouldn't call it selfish, but it's just the nature in which people grow, children grow. So as they grow up, they start understanding the environment around them and the relationships and the connections and the power dynamics and all those various things. And that's when you actually start seeing sympathy and empathy within children. So it's the same thing with leaders. You can definitely learn to be empathic. It takes effort. It takes abandoning your ego and your selfishness and thinking only about yourself. It also takes being altruistic and actually projecting keeping your emotions out of the way and allowing the other person to be completely able to express themselves. So there are a number of techniques that you can use to become empathic and develop into an empathic person. So yeah, I would definitely agree that you can develop empathy and you can actually make empathy as a core tenet of your organization.
Interesting, Gautam, because I had this category a bit different, but I think Aparna came up with it. So I'll go ahead with this. And just on a side note, Gautam, in terms of exploring the root of a author, the topic that you have chosen is a very complex topic, and it's not a very widely spoken subject. What exactly is the key thought that made you think that this could be something people will be interested in? Because it's not at all an easy subject. If I talk about the question that Aparna just said, usually we know that this is more of a personal way of representing yourself, but it has got categories as well, and every category has got a different kind of a profile as such. So how do you see this a subject for anybody working in the space, and how can they grow and understand where they are good at, and how exactly can they grow the other 2-3 categories as well?
Yeah, so for me, I think the reason why I'm so passionate about empathy, I owe it all to my mother. So my mother was an extremely empathic person. She was a doctor, and she was one of a very prominent researcher in India. She used to focus on HIV/AIDS research, and so early on, she exposed me to different parts of society. I went with her to interview different people, and I write about it in the book about some of the people that I actually met and who made an impact on me. So she was extremely empathic to a fault. And one of the things that she said was that if you have not done something to improve the quality of life of a human, then you have not really lived. And that is something that I've taken to heart, and that is something that I've shaped my entire career on. And she passed in 2009, but I've tried my level best to continue her legacy in this way. The reason why it's so compelling to me now more than ever is when I joined the industry and when I started driving, I was like all of you, extremely ambitious, and I wanted to grow up the corporate ladder and I wanted to climb up and so on. And inevitably, what happens is you get burnout, right? Because you're pushing yourself at 110% all the time. It's not a sustainable pace. And so I started seeing myself getting a burnout, and it didn't there wasn't really a way by which the environment or the organization was set up to help people properly. And so that's something that made me realize that we have a gap and we need to be talking more about it. And it is okay to actually show your emotions in the workplace, because somehow we have this false facade that we put in the workplace where you have professional you and then you have the personal you, and you feel that emotions are not supposed to have a place in the workplace. And I wanted to break those barriers down, because that's not really true. I mean, if anything, the last 26 months that we've been living has shown that there is no separation anymore between professional life and personal life. Everything is merged together. All our disparate physical locations have collapsed into one single continuous unit, which is our home for the most part. And so when you have your web stream or your video conferencing going on in your meetings and your work, and then you have your loved ones and your partners also having it, and then maybe your children also having their virtual school going on, at that point, it's not a work from home situation, it's called existence from home. And so those lines are blurred so much. And so I took it upon myself to actually help teams and help them embrace empathy and actually demonstrate their feelings and demonstrate their emotions and increase that trust and psychological safety. We don't have a lot of empathic leadership within our organizations. We still think very militaristically and very hierarchical, and we need to change that. And that was the crux of writing this book. We need to start the dialogue. The book is understanding the needs of today's workforce, because everyone's suffering. There's so much of stress and anxiety in the world, not just because of the pandemic, but you have all these other political problems, you have economic problems, you have health problems. You have in the US, especially, you have all this systemic racism that is there. You have privilege problems that are going on, biases. There's so many problems that are going on that we need empathy now more than ever. And this is what prompted me to actually write this book at this time. And I take it as an opportunity to talk to people, especially leaders, and teach them that there are simple ways by which you can introduce empathy within your organization. But it all starts with being authentic. You want to be genuine. That is the most important thing that you want to do. When you, I call it the say to do ratio. When you say you're going to do something, you want to make sure that you do it. And so your say to do ratio should be as close to 1 as possible. And that's the only way you can build trust and you can build respect and reputation within an organization. And when you have that, and when you demonstrate that you're empathic and you're vulnerable and you're candid and open and welcoming, that's when the psychological safety within the organization also increases. People will then take more risks. They are willing to fail fast, often, and cheap, which is one of the tenets of DevOps, right? You want to fail often, fast, and cheap. they're going to take that. They're going to take risks. And when they do all that, then you're going to have a learning organization. You'll have a positive culture, and it grows and it becomes manifests itself into a generative organization. And all it takes is these small things. Random acts of kindness is another thing, for example. When you perform a random act of kindness, you're actually helping someone without expecting something back. You're actually giving more than you take. And those are the things: being authentic, being vulnerable, being welcoming, being open, being accessible. These are the things that will help you become more empathic.
I see Suresh also with us. So welcome, Suresh. And the floor is open for questions to Gautam. He's taking direct questions.
It's a very interesting topic. I didn't want to miss it. I just wanted to pop in and say thanks, Gautam, for sharing your lessons, and Aparna and Santanu, doing a great job of doing this meetup. So a couple of questions, Gautam. One of the things that we are seeing in the industry today is there's a lot of pressure that comes in as part of the deliverables, right? Every leader is inundated with the deliverables and so much pressure, right? We can always talk about being empathetic when things are at ease, right? But when the pressure is on, the heat is on, it becomes very difficult. But sometimes we lose emotions. Let's be very honest, because there's so much of pressure from the top to do it. While I understand that empathy is a very important part, how do you maintain that balance? Because at one end, you still are answerable as a leader for the deliverables that we talk as part of a transformation. The other aspect is we also need to make sure that we don't lose our temper and give the psychological safety to our people. But that's a tough trait to do it. I mean, how have you seen handling that in real time?
That is a great question, Serration, and that's a problem that almost every leader faces throughout the world. And more so now than ever, because the customer expectation is, the patience of the customer has dropped so much that we need to be able to deploy and deliver things as quickly as possible. While at the same time, we want to make sure that people don't burn out, right? The word sustainable pace is used as a panacea for this particular problem, but sustainable pace can mean different things to different people. What I have done, and what I continue to encourage people to do, especially if you are in the delivery space or in product management space and you want to deliver products on a consistent place, is you want to invest in three important things. And it actually goes to something that I'm also passionate about, which is lean, agile, and DevOps. Those are the three things that are actually going to help and save you. You need to be as lean as possible. You want to chunk things down. You want to make them as lean experiments. You want to embrace your build, measure, learn cycles, and you want to eliminate waste. There is a ton of waste in every process, and that is actually going to cause increase in friction and increase in manual toil. And that causes stress and anxiety. So that is the first thing that I would encourage people to do. The next thing I would encourage is to embrace agility as a mindset and not just as mechanisms. So a lot of people that I see, they tend to take SAFe, for example, as a framework, which and I'm going to keep my opinions about SAFe aside for this particular dialogue, but my point is, going through the motions and being performing the rituals does not mean that you're being agile. Agility is chunking it down and trying to deliver the business value as quickly as possible as you can. And the third thing is DevOps. And the reason why I say it is DevOps really helps you automate the mundane tasks and elevates the focus of people onto high value activities and allows systems to perform the low value activities. Now, what you're doing is you're A, reducing your manual toil. B, you're making it much more idempotent, which means that you can either roll back or roll forward quickly and easily. And you can replicate things, it's consistent, and you know where the problem or issue could be. With people, especially when you have manual tasks, it's hard. People are non-deterministic and non-realistic. They're NP hard. So it's really hard to predict what behavior could happen and mistakes could occur. So investing in automation to reduce that manual toil and reduce the overall friction in the flow of business value through the organization is something that we have to invest in. So those are 3 topics, right, that we do. The next thing that we want to do is, and these 3 topics actually focus more on the execution portion of things. But then you also have other things. You want to improve the collaboration between the people, because that's how empathy starts getting built. You want to build those high-performing teams, so you want to pair with people. You want to develop all these other techniques. So collaboration techniques is something you need to focus on. Communication is the other one that you want to improve. And by communication, I just don't mean that repeating the same information multiple times or having a ton of meetings. What I'm really saying is we probably want to improve the signal to noise ratio that we have. So you're actually focusing on the purpose and what needs to be done, rather than how it needs to be done. So you focus on delivering why something needs to be done and what the business outcomes are, and let the team be empowered enough to actually achieve how they want to do it. And so that's the communication aspect of it. And then afterwards, you want to have continuous learning. You want to share all the failures. You want them to learn and grow, which is another tenet of DevOps, which is you want to have that learning. So all those various things will put together. It will help improve empathy. But as a leader, you need to constantly, adjust the deliverables versus sustainable pace. You need to push back when needed, pick your battles where they are. Sometimes you want to crowdsource empathy. And this is where your vulnerability comes in, right? You will, let's say that you are put in a really hard situation, especially during pandemic. There are some situations, especially in healthcare, where you can't deliver something late. It could mean thousands of deaths, right? So there's tangible problems with delays. Humanize the problem. Try to tell them that this is the impact to the customer rather than saying this is a deliverable. Talk about the impact that the work is going to do. Tell them how they are improving the approach. Relate to them. And then at the same time, push back and try to help maintain that sustainable pace and define what the sustainable pace is when you are getting these deliverables. And this is something that that has helped at least me and I'm pretty sure it'll help all of you. But I agree with you. It's a huge challenge, but I think that's one of the exciting things of being a leader, that you're trying to protect and abstract and provide that air cover for amazing awesomeness and innovation to occur, while at the same time you're trying to promote them and make things nourish or nurture.
Great insight, Gautham. I think I really love the way that you dissected this whole scenario into part, because it's always good to start to look at different facets, because we tend to be so much inclined towards the ways that has actually helped us so far, but it need not take us forward on that journey. The second question that I just want to step in is that today, I think we have a very big problem in terms of remote working. I don't know how much of you have seen. It's probably getting very insane in the way of number of meetings. We thought that it's only going to be the 4 ceremonies that we were thinking about, or 5 ceremonies. This is getting way beyond. And I have a particular problem when I talk with my clients. They say the freshers who are inducted, they have not even come back to office. They are all working remotely. Half the times they don't switch on the videos, right? I mean, it's pretty disgusting in the way they work. So I don't know how much you think the work from home is actually making it really worthwhile to do it, because this is familiar quote from Narana Murthy's of Infosys saying that, in India, at least particularly, because this is an India forum, I'd probably make that call out. The way we work, bonding ourselves physically in a location has got far, far more bearing towards what we're doing it remotely. So I'm a big fan of being a people-centric person, going there and talking with people, having that, tea and conversations together. So I don't know, how do you tackle working remote task force efficiently? Because there are certain people who are defined by purpose, but by and large, I think it's a big trade-off. I mean, the way there's too much of work being done, it's not being productive. So how do you handle as a leader without being micromanaging things. So that's always been my some kind of a question that I wanted to ask in my insight and my experience of what I've seen, that you might have some things to say.
Suresh, you're on a roll here. You're asking some amazing questions. So I just want to acknowledge that. So let's try to break it down, and let's see if it helps. Meetings. Meetings are the bane of productivity. I will say that out of the gate. And it exploded in 2020, especially when we were in lockdown and we couldn't go to the offices. So suddenly we're becoming triple or quadruple booked at the same time, because the barrier to entry of creating a meeting is so low. It's just a click of a button. And in the book, I go on a rant on meetings and how to reduce them. I even talk about a technique called a power start. Feel free to read upon that later. I'm not gonna cover that here, but I acknowledge that meetings are a huge problem. The 67% of people are working more than 60 to 70 hours a week just because of the meetings, because you have meetings throughout the week, throughout the day, and then you have to do your work because you still have deliverables. So there are a couple of techniques. The first technique is stop running meetings as support forums. If you are going to have 100 people or 50 people in a meeting, then it's not a meeting, it's a support forum. You're not going to get anything out of it. So be much more purposeful. If there's no agenda, I have always empowered my teams to reject the meeting. They don't have to attend. And it's not just the teams here, the global teams that I've had. If there's no meeting with an agenda, if the meeting is without an agenda, no, they don't need to do it. If they're in the CC, they don't have to attend that meeting because it's optional. We have told the meeting creators or the people who start the meeting that if they're in a two, there must be some decision making or some action that has to come out of it, or they have to report upon something. Otherwise, you don't want that person to be there. So we try to filter and clear that so that we create this space where people can actually do work rather than attend meetings and so on. So that really helps. The other thing that I do, and this is really hard because it has a lot to do with the culture and the environment. Switching on cameras, for example, right, in a meeting, it can be challenging at times. I have been in a number of global teams where I hardly see anyone on camera. So one of the first things that I do, and I reiterate this multiple times, is to say that, or actually I talk about the fact that, okay, the only times when you want to turn off your camera is when you are probably eating, or when you're probably interacting with someone else in the house, or let's say your child or your pet or someone is there and you're consoling that. And even at that time, it's okay, because the minute we started having video conferencing, we have invited everyone into our living rooms. So that ship has sailed. So we encourage people to be open. And then one of the things that I do, and probably some don't like it, is I call out on them and I say, hey, this particular person, why don't you, what are your thoughts about this? And then I ask them specifically, can you please turn on your camera? And that encourages them, and that invites them to actually turn on the camera, because a lot of people feel insecure, or they might be reserved. It's a cultural thing with us. And so it takes a lot of hard work, but continuous repetition is something that is needed. With regards to your other part of the question, I firmly feel that again, it's very cultural, and there are many people who feel much more comfortable when they're isolated from their home and they can focus only on work. So they like the office to work. Some people feel that, when they're comfortable in their own place, then they can interact better, and so that's okay. But what I've found that will help in these things is pairing. When you pair two people together, and we at VMware, we're big on pairing. I come from Pivotal, so we've been doing pairing for a number of years. And so even as a leader, I pair with someone else. I pair with the C-suite. So when we always pair, the expectation is that the cameras are always on and they establish that connection and that relationship within the team. And that way, you not only have increased productivity, but you also have mentoring that is going on. You have that psychological safety that comes up. And so those are some things that you can do in order to increase the productivity and increasing to do that. The third thing that I do, and this, it might seem counterproductive because this is actually going to be an additional ritual on the calendar, but we do something, and this is something I promote. It's called a spin down. So at the end of the day, at the end of the shift or whatever it is, 15 minutes, the team assembles and they talk about what they accomplished that day. So the things that the wins that they had, the tickets that they completed. They don't talk about the problems or the impediments or all this. Those are the daily stand-ups. That's for them. But what you want to do is you want to signal the end of a day and you want to end it on a high note. So you have them say, oh, I accomplished all these things. They're getting dopamine as a result of that. And so they feel fulfilled and they've actually accomplished something. And then you enable people, give kudos to the other. So this person is going to give kudos to the other because they helped them with some problem. And that increases the serotonin or the bonding level within the teams. And so pretty soon they're going to start feeling comfortable enough to actually switch on the cameras and talk and be more productive. And it also gives you a continuous feel of how the team is working on a day-to-day basis. But no more than 15 minutes. We made a real mistake by introducing chairs and stand-ups. And stand-ups now in some meetings are like 30 minutes to an hour. And at that point, it's a status meeting, it's not a stand-up. And so it has to be 15 minutes, no more than that. But that really has helped. And it encourages people to be much more forthcoming and increase that psychological safety.
Thanks, Gautam. That's great insight. Thank you again.
Thanks, Suresh, for joining in. Great questions, and this conversation has been really useful actually for a lot of us. So, Gautam, the next question is with such huge portfolios that we have right now, what do you suggest as strategic and calculated decisions that should be taken up? Where we have huge backlogs from client and impact of a small change is big.
Yeah.
What are your suggested steps?
I am not going to use the standard consultant phrase, it depends. I'm going to say that after the gate. So let me try to break it down. There are three things that we can do. So the first thing is, I'm a big proponent of connectivity, right? You mentioned it as well. It's not just one additional thing that comes in, it's actually exponential because it blooms into a number of other initiatives or projects or tasks that happen. So every initiative must have connectivity. So the first step that I do is I encourage leaders to understand the purpose of the initiative, the why. Why is this particular initiative coming in? Why does it exist? What are the outcomes that one hopes to get out of it? What is the value that this initiative will generate? So understanding the why, the purpose of that particular initiative is critical. That's the first step. The next step that I do is to develop what I call a value matrix and create a connectivity graph. So value, more often than not, people just limit it to revenue, right? Revenue or ROI is just one value that is gained. When you think of things like digital transformation initiatives, you have much other values. So process optimization, reducing technical debt, better time to value, improved flow modernization, happier people, attracting and retaining talent. All these are different examples of value. So you want to understand for this particular initiative, what are the things that are going to be improved? What is the value that's going to be developed? And you create this value matrix for each initiative. And then you create that connectivity graph, that connects the strategic initiative to the tactical projects, to the operational execution tasks. Those are the three levels that you do. I mean, we do that in Agile frameworks, right? We have teams, we have features, and then we have stories. So we're used to this particular concept. It's same as that. If you're using SAFe, for example, it's like dependency mapping that you do. So you try to connect these from an initiatives level. And that will help us trace the impact that our decisions will make. And so one of the things that I always ask people to remember is that adding or greenlighting an initiative does not increase the work in process by one. What it does is it's an exponential increase. And so you always need to be aware of that. And so this value matrix and connectivity graph really helps you. The third step then is when you have to make a decision, you probably will do a lot of what if scenarios, right? Say, what if I do this and what if I do that? What if I tweak this particular variable? What happens? So you already have the value matrix and the connectivity graph. You know what is going to get impacted. You then perform an impact effort analysis saying, let's say I have this what if scenario. Let's say I increase a particular variable. What is the impact that it would have on the particular organization? How many of the various things will get impacted, right? And then you calculate what is the effort that is required. And then you have that 2x2 matrix of an impact effort analysis. And then you can make a good data-driven decision-making approach on whether it's worth the squeeze. Is it a low-hanging fruit that you can implement and do quickly? Is it something that needs to be decomposed into smaller chunks to understand it? Or is it something that takes so much of effort that it's not worth the squeeze? So it's easy to decide that. But unless you make it more objective and make it more data-driven, it's going to be really difficult to understand the impact and to work on countermeasures or dependencies. So I would say the 3 steps are understanding the why, the purpose of an initiative, how the initiative will achieve the value or the business outcomes, and then what are all the things that will get affected if there is a change to that particular initiative. So I hope that answers your question, Aparna. I mean, again, these are some generic things, but each initiative obviously will have its own nuances and complications. But I think these are the 3 things that you can start off out of the gate to move into a much more objective and data-driven approach rather than just, keep your finger and try to see where the wind flows or, have a gut response or an emotional response. That's what I feel.
Thank you, Aparna. And Gautam, I think we are almost done with 50 minutes and time flies. I understand that when we have good questions, at least on a weekend. I'll have one last question for you, Gautam, and this is more to understand your views on how you see the difference in the market that we have. So when I talk about the difference, we know that in India, we're coming up with a lot of different cultures in the way organizations are running. So if you talk about the last decade, or maybe I'm not sure if you have seen the nuances of how it goes, but since 2005 and 6, Bangalore has transformed. I know it's your, it's a place you're very close to you, and you've seen how this place has changed over the last 2 decades. So a lot of new companies are coming up with a lot of new, fresh ideas. When you see those, they include a lot of cultural backlog of the country. So when I say cultural backlog, people in India are conditioned and groomed to work in a different way. But when we talk about how companies are coming up and accelerating their pace to go hand in hand with technology, they are actually emulating models of West. So that's a different culture all totally. When you see the current setup of these companies in India with the people that they work with versus the people and the setup in the West, what are the key things that you see could be a difficult or maybe could be a challenge to handle in the future? And what should the future be like in that market? I don't know if you will be diplomatic in answering this, but there is obviously a difference in the way things are happening versus the way things should happen. I just want your take on that.
Yeah. Deepak, what I'll do is probably I'll send the link to Shantanu, and he can probably broadcast where the book is available on Amazon.
I have that. I had it ordered myself and I got it this week. I will send you the link, Deepak, on LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for buying the book. So here's something that you'll find out about the book. I'm a big believer of random acts of kindness. So all a large portion of the royalties from this book actually are going to nonprofits that will help the underprivileged, underrepresented minorities and the homeless. So by buying this book, you are performing a random act of kindness to someone in the world and improving the life of someone. So thank you for buying the book. Okay, let's go back to your question. And let me try to answer it as directly as I can. The first thing that I feel, and I completely agree with you, culture plays a huge portion of how we do. We have that baggage, we grew up, our environment, all those various things. You kindly call it a cultural backlog. I would actually call it more of limiting beliefs and baggage that holds us back and does not help us achieve our full potential. But there are a couple of things that we can do that we have traditionally not been doing in the past, which is very different from Silicon Valley here. The first thing is, and I talked about it, your limiting beliefs. You need to make sure that you are not insecure and you feel that the sky's the limit. You have the passion, you have a dream, you can achieve it. So don't limit yourself. So work on your limiting beliefs. That's the first one. The second one is, especially in India, and I say this having been an electrical engineer and a computer science scientist, that we focus a lot on the technology skills. And we think that technical is going to solve all the problems. But in reality, technology can only be an accelerator. It enables things to happen, but it cannot generate value by itself. So we need to start thinking on those lines. We need to make sure that we're focusing on the customer and on the human aspect of things. No product in this world exists if it does not improve someone's life in some way. That is something we need to focus on. Customer empathy is really important. If you've gone to design school, that is one of the most fundamental things they talk about is customer empathy. You design for improving customer experience or user experience. So that's something we need to focus on. So don't limit yourself to just the technical skills. You need to focus on the soft skills or the leadership skills as well. I cannot stress that enough. That is a big difference that people have here. They try to connect, they try to understand. And that is something we really need to focus on. And that is why things like empathy, things like empathic leadership is really, really important. The next thing that I feel we want to do that we don't do a good job at all, and this is something I learned the hard way, was maintaining a healthy work-life balance. We don't do that at all in India. We think that unless we're working, we're wasting time. And that is the worst thing that can happen. If you're always working and trying to do some mundane task, when are we allowing our brain to not only regenerate and relax, but also think and innovate and try to take risks and develop all these new features? When are we trying to do that? So I've seen many newcomers and ambitious people thinking that putting in long and hard hours is a sign of productivity and good work ethic. But I'll give you an alternate perspective. So at the end of the day, it's the output that matters, right? So with all things being equal, if one spends more time at a task and derives the same output as someone who spends lesser time at a task, what is it truly a sign of? It's a sign of efficiency. It's not a sign of productivity. So that's something that I want people to start thinking of. And I know that in countries like India and China and a number of Asian countries, the culture has propagated that one has to work in order to have value. But I've seen some people get visibly unhappy and impacted when I tell them that they should not work on a weekend. In fact, in one of the organizations that I've taken over, working after hours and over the weekends was a norm and expected. And the teams were suffering from a lot of burnout, attrition, unhappiness in the workforce. So one of the things that I did was mandate that moving forward, there would be no weekend work without my approval. And that the director of the group needed to justify to me why weekend work was necessary, because we wanted to understand why there's so much waste. That caused a lot of consternation, as one would imagine, but somehow it's become so deep-rooted in our psyche that we're not performing some work or task, then our net worth is reduced. So taking time off causes anxiety to people, and that should not be the case. if you cannot invest in yourself, you cannot expect an organization to invest in you. That's what I firmly believe. And so having that work-life balance is really, really important. And we need to make sure that we're actually alive and not incapacitated to enjoy the fruits of our hard work. So that is something we need to think. And when we have that work-life balance, we become happier. And when we are happier, we are much more relaxed. We have more psychological safety. And then we can start thinking about things and dreaming about things that we can accomplish. So that is the second one, or the third one that I would say. And the last one that I would tell people to do, and we'll probably wrap on this, is give more than you can take. That is a philosophy that I have lived by throughout my life. It always pays dividends in the end. It's altruistic, it's kind, it's compassionate, and it's empathic. When you give more than you can take, you have immense amount of happiness. What I've seen is people evaluate the net worth of gains that they can get from a person before they decide to help. And that is not helping. That's an exchange of services. And it will not win favors to you or your friends. It won't help you create those relationships to establish yourself. It won't make you a leader. Remember, to be a leader, you need to have people willingly follow you. Otherwise, you're just taking a walk. So give more than you take and genuinely want to help people. And I think I'm going to end on that one. But those are 4 things that I really want to share.
Amazing, Gautam. Thanks a lot for taking out the time this weekend. And we had a lot of takeaways. I am going to summarize them and publish it on LinkedIn. And I will certainly plan one more session with you to talk more about the book. It's more about how we understand and what can be discussed from the learning. So I've started with the first chapter, and as you rightly said, a lot of the content that I see, that I sense that we have following in the following 5-6 chapters is from how you were conditioned, and it's actually something that we can learn and we can train ourselves with. A lot of new things, a lot of takeaways from this discussion today, and thank you for having the time. I think it's almost 3 minutes over the schedule. Thank you for taking out the morning schedule, Gautam. We love to have you, and we look forward to having you again on this.
Thank you for having me. It's been an amazing conversation. And thank you all for taking time out of your Saturday evenings. I know how precious it is. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, everyone, and wish you have a nice Sunday ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.